how to go forward after getting an experiential dose. I don't mean like what's on your nervous system. I mean literally the experience of trauma and what it does to presence within the body, both in the past and in the future and in the present. So you're going to get a view of human consciousness that tries to take in that we're transcendent beings, meaning that we can live in past, present, and future, and they can be confused. And how yoga might actually not treat that, because I don't think I want to let you know, I want to help people that have come from trauma come home, right? Not so much treat them, right? So I want to show you some of the things that I think how yoga can be, not just yoga, but a mind-body approach can be very powerful at getting at some of the root effects of what's happened with trauma. Everyone else gave their name and where you're from and...
Shodo, Faribault. I work at Mill Lake, just started.
Okay, all right. Very quick, that was succinct. That was good. So I want to take, so not as many people have as much with the trauma-informed yoga, but so there's in your handout, and I'm not an expert in trauma-informed yoga, and what I've learned, I've done this workshop a few times, and I decided the last time I came out a little hot and heavy against trauma-informed yoga, the approach, and I want to like dial it back just a little bit, right? Because I think that, especially if you're working with a group of people that have extreme trauma, that are having trouble for sure showing up into the room, being in public, all the rules of trauma-informed yoga make more sense, I think, than and it might be a first step. So know that I think that what I'm trying to present is a both and then you get to go figure it out. Okay? All right, so I want to just kind of go over quickly a little bit about both psychologically and the method, kind of the conceptual. Remember, I'm trained as a philosopher, okay, and in graduate school, and so I actually think that the conceptual framework upon which we're thinking about trauma is misemphasized. And I think that affects then how we're treating people with trauma or how we're relating to that, and why we're maybe not being as effective as we could. I mean, it's an epidemic. So many of the people coming home from Afghanistan, suicide rates, insane. Somehow what we're doing isn't right. You can't just medicate, you can't just, there's something not right about it. And so I'm going to try to point out where I think where the places might be that is. All right, so if you look at this, it was I think on my packet, it was the second or third to last sheet, samples of approaches to treating trauma and PTSD. So it's just it's a couple of quotes, 3 quotes, right? And I think from what little I've actually, my problem for me is that I don't study what anyone else does, I just try to figure it out myself, so I am not an expert on Judith McCormick, right? I just know that I paid attention to some of the trauma-informed yoga and how they draw on Judith Herman, who's considered to have done some of the landmark work on dealing with trauma, right? So you nod, so say a little bit about Heather.
I don't know a lot I have not read her research and her work, but I know her name as someone who is considered an expert.
Right, an expert. And she, and like, for example, I just in this last few days, last few weeks, listened to a course put on by Bessel Badnercook by a tremendous amount of respect, but then his yoga complement, Dan Emerson, Dave Emerson, yeah. And some of the things I'm taking from them is that I think are really smart, but also some things I'm going to say that I think are off. Okay? So here's one of the lines that, and I think it's interesting. Well, I'm just going to read it to you. Judith Herman. It's a big quote that really affects how literally some of the leaders in treating complex trauma, not just PTSD, but complex trauma, how they're thinking about it. This is one of the big lines of how they think about it, how their training proceeds. I also want to say, although I'll be talking more about, I'll be telling stories about vets and stuff, and we need to talk about domestic violence too, and domestic trauma. Know that it's all on the table, and what I'm trying to get to is at the core of what I think that happens in the mind-body relationship in all sorts of trauma. But here's a big quote from Judith Miller that really affects how Bester Van Kolk and Dave Emerson go forward. The core experiences of psychological trauma are disempowerment and disconnection from others. Recovery, therefore, is based on empowerment of the survivor and the creation of new connections. I don't think so. Okay, just flat out. But I think that would be, I think that disempowerment is one of the symptoms. When they say core experiences, I think they're thinking, and rightly so, they're thinking of a psychosocial model, right? So I am no artist, right? So I'm just drawing a person, this person has trauma, right? That kind of description, and then there's other people in the world, right? All around them, right? Notice they're gender free. Right? This kind of description has to do with this person is the survivor of trauma, has to do with their ability to relate, on a psychosocial level, right? Right? Like, how is it that they're mentally thinking? How is it they're interacting with people? And in fact, this training that the trauma-informed yoga is often based on is the idea that trauma fundamentally is about relationship and power. That the person's been disempowered and they're not going to function well in relationship. Right? And therefore, but she said psychological trauma, and I don't think there's any such thing as psychological trauma. I think that every trauma is mind-body trauma. And again, right out of the gate, you can see like I'm already going, that's probably not actually the way to think about it. I think that a lot of the approach to trauma has been pioneered by psychologists. Makes sense. So they're going to think about it differently, right? One of the great things about what Judith Herman did, like for example, one of my good friends, Patricia Francisco, who is a survivor of rape, who wrote an amazing book, by the way, called Telling a Rape of Trauma, a Rape of Healing and Recovery. A story of rape and recovery, a memoir of rape and recovery. This is for her, Judith Herman's one of her heroes, because she was the first one to write, your suffering with trauma is not just psychological. It includes your body, right? Huge prison release for Patricia that was, had her trauma back in the 80s, right? So know that this person is a dynamo in opening up a whole different way of thinking about it. However, she's a psychologist that deals with a lot of trauma and thinks of it in terms of power and relationship. And so trauma-informed yoga often does that. It actually tries to respond to that. So therefore, recovery, is based on empowerment of the survivor and the creation of new connections. So if you think that the fundamental symptom of trauma is powerlessness, then of course you might think that empowering would be the way to go about it. I'm not sure about that. In fact, I doubt it. I think but I think on this level, it may be, like for example, we talk about domestic trauma, right? If I've been abused by my father, then all my relationships with male figures, I may feel like I don't have enough power in relationship to those male figures, right? So clearly this occurs. That's what I'm saying. It's like, I want to try to offer a slightly different place to land this, but I'm not denying that all this occurs. I just don't think when you say the core experience of trauma, I don't think they're looking deeply enough into the actual experience mind-body relationship. They're looking at how they interact with the world. Here would be an example from disability, right? No one asked me when I went through recovery, after having so many injuries, they never asked me what the experience of disability is like. They talked about what living with a disability would be like, which is different. Right? There's the experience of paralysis, and then there's being a paralyzed person in the world. Judith, who I don't know, but I talk like I know her. Judith, in a lot of the approach, is actually functioning at the level of wondering what it's like to be traumatized and live in the world. Right? More. And we're thinking about those relationships. That's part of it, and I want to go this weekend, in the next 10 hours, I want to go a different direction. Right? All right. So this idea that because it's about a loss of disempowerment, right? The second line by Judith Herman, therefore, you can almost say therefore, no intervention. And I already noticed the language. Remember, I want to help him come home. I'm not thinking about interventions. That's like medical talk for how a medical person would be thinking about treating a patient, right? But no intervention that takes power away from the survivor can possibly foster her recovery, no matter how much it appears to be in her immediate best interest. So if you know anything about trauma-informed yoga, and again, if you don't know, it doesn't matter, I'm giving you a backdrop that's like a symptom of the approach. It's all invitational language. It's all like, well, if you'd like to take your arm over your head. Because they're taking that so strictly, they're applying it to everything about language. And all of a sudden a bunch of rules start happening. Right? And I don't think the fundamental way of thinking about this is about worrying about taking away power. Now the argument on the other side is, as a yoga teacher, for example, no matter what you want to believe, you're in a more powerful situation than the student. Right? But if that's really, really true, then how I talk about it isn't going to change it either. If I say all this nice, squishy language, try this, try that, and only if you feel good about this, that in fun, if I'm the person receiving that language, because I get that a lot as a disabled person, I actually know that you think less of me right away because you're trying to make the world safe for me. Guess what? You can't make the world safe for me. Right? So already, guess what? We got you don't change power dynamic by changing your language. It's deeper than that. Right? All right. So, but the line I want to focus on to try to explain what I want to do in the next 10 hours together from Bessel van der Kolk. For real change to take place, the body needs to learn that the danger has passed, that the danger passes, and to live in the reality of the moment. I'm very interested in that line. Right? So, of the differences, rather than I'm going to try to go, what does that mean? Like, why would that be the emphasis? Why would body awareness and how would body awareness help move along the effects of trauma? Okay, and so this weekend is going to be weirdly and wildly experiential. I'm going to try to give you insight into I'm going to talk kind of mystically about being transcendent beings and whatever, because I think we're not taking it seriously enough. I think that, like with PTSD, for example, in particular, I think we're not taking seriously enough that we have this thing called memory, right? And we think it's so ordinary because we all have it that we don't think it's absolutely extraordinary. It is stunning that we can bring something that no longer exists, i.e. the past, and it imprints us, whether it be mentally, physically, or whatever, and we can have it come into the present. And it's even more stunning that an event that no longer exists actually can affect your interactions in the future. This is something that is, I think, fundamentally not thought of deeply enough. Because we're thinking too much about the practical level of interaction here and not exploring our nature and why we're vulnerable to something like trauma and PTSD. Does this make sense? Follow me with this? Because when you don't, ask me. Okay? So that I'm more interested in what's going on in the mind-body relationship of someone that's absorbed trauma. You know what's great? I don't mean what's going on in their nervous system below their conscious awareness. I actually care a lot about this person's experience. Not what they think all the time, but literally what's happening to the sensation of life force in their body and what it means to lose boundary and what it means to lose trust. Because I think that the body is going to show and reveal how to go forward on this level than the mind can ever. So I really want to we're going to explore all weekend wait, what the heck is going on here? Why is it that someone, for example, there are all different types of trauma, right? But someone that, I've been teaching yoga long enough where I can tell a lot of times when trauma is walking through the door. And so I'm going to grossly generalize different stories of people, right? So the person that maybe had a really loud, doesn't even have to be abusive or sexually abusive parent, like father, right? But was really loud and big and a big presence. And they tend to be the person that wants to get the blanket for somebody else, that wants to be around the edges, not quite be seen, not quite be felt, because they internalized into their mind-body relationship that if they took up less space, they were safer. Right? So it's affecting them. That's how they're on the psychosocial model, then it's affecting their relationships because they're being small whenever they can. Right? So there'll be and I don't want to teach that person expansion. I want them to create conditions where expansion is happening from inside to out. And I know yoga is a really powerful way to do that. Okay, so one of the things that with what they're doing at Bessel van der Kolk Center that I really agree with is they really somehow think that this fancy word called interoception, that's just called body awareness, mind-body awareness, and just let it be simple, is strangely the key to helping someone move along. That it's pretty simple, that you want to be, and that's why they're having people move. And what I think is they're not seeing the other potential of yoga. Body awareness can be taught, or interoception. I don't want to, there's so many different thoughts about what that is now. I don't want to get caught I think the body awareness is great, but yoga, if you only use yoga for body awareness, you might as well just done a different form of movement. There's so much more potential for yoga to help someone heal than it is just the fact that you teach them to be in their body in the present moment. They use yoga the way they teach yoga for present moment awareness. And I think, those of you that practice yoga, the potential for yoga to help someone that's gone through trauma is way more than just present moment awareness. Because present moment awareness sounds mental, doesn't it? Like mindfulness, right? You want to say no?
What about a body scan?
That would be a mental, so one of the things that I'm going to try to say, you're going through and you're trying to feel it going from here, that there are truths that move in both directions, right? That there are things that you need to get that are coming up from the body to the mind that are going to be really important, not just what you're aware of in a single moment. Because if anyone that's done this yoga long enough knows that in any yoga pose there's more happening than you can know. In your own body. Every yoga pose is that. I'm an yoga teacher. I'm telling you, I can show you experiences that were happening while you're standing that you never knew were happening. That's just the truth. There's always more going on, right? All right, so this makes sense, some, how it's different. If I'll be pointing out as we go things that I think, what I think yoga can actually do in ways that no other mind-body methodology can do. But more than that, I want to focus on the sensations that someone that is living with trauma, loss, because loss is a kind of trauma, right? Trauma, loss, and disability would need to be more whole. What sensations do they need to practice? Right? What is it that they're no longer having? So I'll say some lines like right now that we'll live into over the next 10 hours. Like one of the things that I think has happened to someone that's been traumatized is that they've confused the sensation of being open with the sensation of vulnerability. Literally, in their bodies. They associate the sensation of receiving with the sensation of threat. I want to help them separate what's gotten confused at that simple level. I want them to not think support is dangerous. The sensation of support. And I think we're going to be able to show them that through the body better than through their mind. That this is going to be much better done through the body. Which, rewires the brain, right? It'd be like neuroplasticity and stuff. All that stuff, those fancy words, right? In fact, you're only aware of 5% of your brain's activities. So but your 95% of your brain is dealing with also all the other activities of your body. So if you wanted to affect more of the brain, you should probably touch the body a lot. But we'll talk about that. Ooh, touch bad. Are you sure? And you get to decide where you land, right?